Welcome to the cabin. Today we're once again returning to the Volgan War and painting some new A.B.C. Warriors miniatures from Warlord Games. We've got Wave 3 right here ready to get unboxed, so let's get to it. We've previously painted all the miniatures from Waves 1 and 2 of A.B.C. Warriors here on the channel. If you missed those, there's a link to the playlist on screen right now. A big thank you to Kieran and the others at Warlord Games for sending us Wave 3 as well. This time it's all about the auxiliary forces of the G-Men, floppies hellbent on apprehending miscreant robots. We also get their retro-looking Grav Car and a giant arachnobot known as KRASBO. If you're interested in A.B.C. Warriors or other 2000 AD properties, you can use our affiliate link from Warlord Games in the description down below. They also have a bunch of other popular game systems like Bolt Action, Hail Caesar, Pike and Shot, and many others. So if you're interested, please check it out. Let's start with the floppies. Thanks yet again to Vaz for packing these. The Mekana G-Men are led by Detektiv Inspektor Sturn and are sculpted mid-levitation, barely touching their bases. I undercoated the G-Men with Chaos Black, as about 90% of these miniatures will be painted black. I started by giving them a zenithal highlight with my airbrush using Ashen Grey. This was followed by a more selective highlight of Dawnstone. I then grabbed a normal paintbrush and added some edge highlights with Administratum Grey on all the fabrics as well as the hats, gloves, and shoes. The buttons on the suits were highlighted with Grey Sear to make them pop a bit more. Finally, I washed all these areas with Nuln Oil to tone down the grey colors and add definition to the recesses. On to the details then. You can glimpse a bit of the collars from their white shirts, so I painted these with pallid witch flesh, followed by a highlight of white scar. For the skin, I chose Bugman's Glow as a base coat. I then layered on Cadian flesh tone and added a highlight of Kislev flesh. To bring everything together, I glazed on Guilliman flesh diluted with plenty of contrast medium. The areas around the eyes were painted with Bloodreaver flesh to create some extra shadow. I then painted the eyes off camera, and for Detektiv Inspektor Sturn's stubble, I also glazed on Basilicanum Grey diluted with contrast medium in several coats on his chin. Sturn's hat stands out with a red rim, so I base coated it with Mephiston Red and added a highlight of Wild Rider Red along the upper edge. One of the G-Men sports some facial hair, and I decided to paint it reddish brown like in the comics. For this, I started with a base coat of Wordbearer's Red, and after that a highlight of Tuskor Fur. A couple of the G-Men have glasses, and I'll show you how I painted those when we get to the windows of the Grav Car. I also used the same colors for the female floppy's blue lipstick, as in the comic. All that was left at this point were the metallics. For the weapons, I chose Leadbelcher as a base coat, and for the symbols on the uniform, I used Retributor armor. The guns were then shaded with Nuln Oil, followed by a highlight of Runefang Steel. Here we have the finished G-Men. I used the same basing techniques as in the previous videos and varnished them with a 1-to-1 mix of matte and satin varnish. It was nice to add some humans to the collection, and I'm happy with how their dark colors and matte finish stand out against the glossy metallics of the war droids. Let's move on to the Grav Car next. This one was packed by Cosmina, thank you very much. The car is cast in traditional resin as opposed to the Cyocast material used for the other miniatures, so it's extra important to wash it properly to remove any mold release agent. If you look closely, you can see that the master model used for the mold was 3D printed, as layer lines are visible in a couple of spots. To fix these, I diluted a bit of milliput in isopropyl alcohol and painted this mix over the areas. After setting overnight, I went over the spots with sanding sponges and, as you can see, the surface is now completely smooth. Once painted, the layer lines are invisible. There were also a couple of small air bubbles on the rear undercarriage, which I filled with green stuff. With the preparations and assembly done, I undercoated the car with lead belcher from below and chaos black from above, to save time compared to painting these areas by hand. I painted the body panels in the same way as the G-Men, starting with the airbrush and then moving on to a normal paintbrush. At this stage, I protected everything with gloss varnish and masked off the areas surrounding the windows. Using my airbrush, I base coated these with Cantor Blue, followed by a highlight of the fang, and finally a selective highlight of rust gray. Just like the G-Men, I painted the metallic details with lead belcher and retributor armor. For the big ornaments, I also added a wash of Reichland flesh shade and a highlight of auric armor gold. The front headlights were base coated with Everland Sunset. I then added several diluted layers of Aerial Yellow, returning to the base color when necessary to create a smooth transition. Next, I used Flash Gitz Yellow in the same way. After that, I added a highlight of Phalanx Yellow and a final highlight of Dorn Yellow. To bring everything together, I applied a glaze of Imperial Fist diluted with contrast medium. The rear headlights were painted in a similar way, starting with Corn Red as a base coat. Mephiston Red served as the first layer, followed by Evil Sun Scarlet. For the first highlight, I used Wild Rider Red, and after that, a final highlight of Troll Slayer Orange. This time I chose Ball Red, diluted with contrast medium, for the glaze. I used Streaking Grime, an enamel paint from AK Interactive, on parts of the undercarriage. The rest of the surface was painted with shafts and bearings grease. After letting these dry for a bit, I used cotton buds and sponges with a bit of mineral spirits to remove some of the enamel paint. The final details to paint were the anti-gravity engines. I base coated these with Temple Guard Blue. Next, I layered on Baharoth Blue, which I diluted quite a bit and reserved for the middle and edges. Finally, I added a dot of Blue Horror and highlighted the edges as well. Here's the finished and based Grav Car, with the same varnish as the G-Men. I like the retro look of the car combined with the futuristic anti-gravity engines. I was also surprised at how sturdy the flight stand was, especially for a heavier resin piece like this. Nice work, Warlord Games. The last miniature for today's video is the KRASBO. Thank you to Alice for packing this one. KRASBO stands for Crime-Related Antisocial Behavior Operative, and these huge spider robots carry blowtorches on their legs and an acid sprayer in their mouth. I painted the KRASBO in the same way as the other robots, achieving a chrome finish with shadows. Check out our video covering the starter box for a complete guide. I was actually a bit more liberal with the Tamiya smoke this time around to darken the KRASBO even more. I then airbrushed a very thin coat of a 2:2:1 mix of Tamiya smoke, Tamiya clear blue, and Tamiya clear red, diluted with X28 thinner. Next, I added a coat of gloss varnish before painting on a 1-to-1 mix of winter streaking grime and shafts and bearings grease from AK Interactive. Once again, I removed some of the paint with mineral spirits after letting it set for a while. To add some interesting patterns on the surface, I used kerosene leaks and stains on some parts of the miniature. Using a brush dampened with mineral spirits, I immediately adjusted these stains, smoothing out their edges and changing their shapes. The blowtorches were painted in the same way as the anti-gravity engines on the Grav Car, and the eyes were base coated with Mephiston red. Next, I highlighted them with Wild Rider red, followed by Troll Slayer orange. Finally, I glazed them with Ball red diluted with contrast medium. And with that, the KRASBO was also completed. I painted the fire on the base in the same way as Blackblood's chalice from the last video in this series. I really like how dynamic and menacing this miniature looks, ready to pounce on an unsuspecting enemy. So there you have it. Wave 3 is finished and ready for action. I think the sculpts are awesome and match the comics really well. It's great to see them face off against the A.B.C warriors on the table, and I can't wait to see what's in store for Wave 4. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to support us, we have a bunch of links that you can check out in the description down below. A special thank you goes out to Arnold for supporting us over on Patreon. We truly appreciate it and are so happy to have you join the Kabin crew. We'll see you next time. Good luck with your miniatures.